Today's special feature webinar will focus on chemical equipment. We'll touch on how to upload your equipment records, as well as how to configure your chemical equipment in the organization space so it can be effectively deployed for your ChemResponder events. In order to manage equipment records in the organization space, you do need the equipment manager role. This is an organizational level role that can be granted to you by an administrator or a personnel manager within the organization. So as I go forward today, if you're not seeing some of the functionality that I'm showing on screen on your own organization's equipment, it's probably because you don't have that equipment manager role. I think it's good to frame this a bit and talk about the value of adding equipment to ChemResponder, what purpose it ultimately serves. So there's a few things I'll hit, starting in the upper left. One of the main uses is that adding your equipment to your ChemResponder organization allows users who are collecting data, say ground truth measurements with the mobile application, to select the specific equipment that they're using. There are a lot of advantages to that. You can actually tie the ground truth reading that'll show in your event space to the exact instrument that was used to take that reading. You can track maintenance here, so we can validate that the equipment has been maintained. We can thus trust its output. So as you'll see here, we'll show you how you can actually add maintenance schedules and maintenance records to any instrument that you've got in ChemResponder. You can also take full advantage of the severity thresholds function. So we'll treat this in more depth later on, but for the chemical readings data type, the thresholds are defined by a combination of the type of chemical sensor you're using, be that carbon monoxide, oxygen, hydrogen sulfide sensor, and the actual reading of the sensor itself. So as you'll see, if you're to see the colorization on the image in the lower right that you're seeing there for your ground truth data records in the event space, you will need to make sure that your sensors are tagged according to the type of sensor that you're using. So we'll talk about that again in more depth. To first orient ourselves a bit, to get to your equipment page, you want to first make sure you're in the organization space. I'm going to be using this demo chem organization, this DCO org for today's webinar. On the side navigation, you go to equipment, and that will bring you to the main equipment table. There are 4 methods for adding equipment to your organization. The first is through a simple web form. So you can see in the top part of the equipment page on the image there, if you click the Add Equipment drop-down, that's the first option that's available for you. You can create a new record. This is most handy when you're adding just one or a handful of instruments at a time. We'll talk about ways that are more conducive to uploading multiple instruments at one time. One of those is to take advantage of the copy from existing option, which is the second option here. So if you are adding multiple instruments that have the same make and model, this is a really handy feature where you can just copy over the properties from the existing record. Makes things more efficient. The create from template function is very similar. You can create a template from any of your existing equipment records, as I'll show you. And finally, we have the bulk upload through the Excel sheet. So you can import your equipment through a Microsoft Excel workbook. And so if you're uploading a lot of measurements at one time, or if you need to update information about multiple records, multiple equipment records at one time, maybe you get a lot of equipment back from maintenance in one fell swoop, you can take advantage of this bulk upload function. So I'll treat each of these 4 methods a little bit more here. So again, the create new function, when you use that option, it'll greet you with a simple web form. You can see that the required fields are going to be marked with the red asterisks. I did want to point out that this assigned to field, that's just under the organization field. Sometimes that throws folks off. That is most often used for dosimetry in rad nuke operations. You can still use it for any type of equipment that you want. As you can see, it doesn't have the red asterisk, so it's not a required field. I think oftentimes for detection equipment, it's not getting assigned to a specific individual, but again, that option is there, primarily designed for dosimetry. As you move further down the form, you're going to come to an equipment types section. And this is where you're going to add the tags that I touched on a little bit earlier. Tags are very important, and you'll see throughout the presentation why that is. But you can see that we can add one or more tags to any of our equipment records. So in the example here, I'm applying the multi-gas meter tag. Depending on the tag or tags that I apply, that will open up additional sections in the form where I can add additional metadata for the equipment, again, depending on the type of tag that I'm adding. So we have here, again, a multi-gas meter. In this example, it opens up the gas meter details section where I can supply additional information. Tags are especially important for sensors, for your chemical sensors. And so again, when you are adding a chemical sensor, you've got a lot of different options here in terms of the type of sensor you're adding. So we've got ammonia sensor tag, carbon monoxide sensor tag, etc. And so to speak a little bit more specifically about why these are important, again, I talked earlier about severity thresholds a little bit. And so the image I'm showing on the right side of the screen there is a table of thresholds that come from a demonstration event. And like I had said before, within your events, the severity thresholds are determined by a combination of the sensor readings value and the type of sensor. In other words, how the sensor is tagged. So if I'm taking measurements with, say, a carbon monoxide sensor, I need to make sure that that equipment, again, has the carbon monoxide sensor tag on it. Then the system will look at, again, how is this sensor tagged? And then it'll look at, again, the numeric values for each of the threshold categories in order to determine how to colorize that reading or which threshold category that reading falls into. So again, to take full advantage of this thresholds feature, you just need to make sure that your equipment is tagged appropriately. Furthermore, when an instrument has a sensor tag on it, you can then add that sensor to a multi-gas meter. So as we go forward, I'll show you how to do that. But again, just to note that in order to be able to do those assignments, those sensor to multi-gas meter assignments, you need to make sure that the sensor has one of the sensor tags applied to it. Moving down here to talk about the other methods for adding new equipment, we talked about this copy from existing function. So again, this is our second option for adding new instrumentation. You can use the copy from existing option when you are entering multiple instruments of the same make and model. So the interface here is going to ask you for the equipment that you want to copy from. It'll auto-populate that manufacturer and model number. You just need to supply a unique serial number and property number. The create from template function, very similar. You'll see that for any equipment record, existing equipment record that you've got, there's an option on the details page for that equipment to convert it to a template. And so you can create templates from any of your existing equipment. And again, it is going to allow you to more efficiently upload additional equipment that has that same make and model. And again, you'll just be supplying the unique properties, namely the serial and property numbers. The bulk upload function. So again, I can both upload new equipment records with this function. I can also do a bulk update with this function. So if you want to update, again, multiple equipment records at once, you can take advantage of the Excel sheet to do that. So on the main equipment page, you'll see the import equipment option towards the top. That'll bring you to an interface where you are given an option to download a new template. So that's that download chemical equipment file with instructions. You also have the option to download your organization's chemical equipment. So again, this is where you would do the bulk updating of your existing instrumentation. To talk a little bit more about that Excel sheet, this is what it looks like. So you can see that for each row will represent one instrument. So the different columns represent the fields we saw from the create web form earlier. Also note that the tabs at the bottom will allow you to navigate to other sheets in the Excel workbook so that we can add additional information for all of our instruments. And in particular, I'll point out at this point the gas meter sensor assignments tab in the middle there. So that's where you can make these gas meter to sensor assignments pretty efficiently. And we'll talk more about that topic in a little bit here. So how do we add sensors to our gas meters? You can associate sensors with multi-gas meters using either the website or the Excel bulk upload function. So I'll first talk about how we can do this directly in the website's interface. So I'm here at my main equipment page with the equipment table showing all my instruments. I've done a search here for the multi-gas meter that I want to add sensors to. So you can see in the image that I've got for my demo purposes, a generic multi-gas meter. And on the far left side, you can click the magnifying glass to go into details for that record. Again, I'm pointing out the importance of tags here. You just need to make sure that this instrument is tagged as a multi-gas meter, or you won't be able to add sensors to it. That functionality actually won't be available in the interface. So again, those tags are important. Once you're in the details view for this multi-gas, I can scroll down and you'll see a section that is called assigned sensors. I can see here the list of sensors that are currently assigned to the multi-gas. And I can see in the header there on the far right, I have a manage option. So you can click manage. That will bring you to a page where we can see how we can assign sensors to this multi-gas. So the interface is pretty straightforward. At the top there, we have the add equipment option, the green button. We can remove existing sensors from the multi-gas as well. So I'll click add equipment. And it's going to pop up a modal here where we can assign equipment to the multi-gas. This is a multi-select, so I can add X number of sensors at one time, any number, to this multi-gas meter. Again, stressing the importance of tags. In this list, you are only going to see sensors that have some type of sensor tag on them. So it'll be a filtered list that shows, again, only chemical sensors. So if that's a carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, oxygen sensor, etc., I will only see those sensors. Again, I can do this as well through the Excel sheet that I showed before. So one of the tabs there is our gas meter sensor assignments. And here for each row, we can enter in the gas meter serial number, the serial number of the sensor, and I can obviously do this for a lot of instruments at once to make it a little bit more efficient for me. Those of you who are familiar with RadResponder, just to note, this function is very similar to how you can assign probes to meters. So it's really the same concept. I also want to point out that you have the option of creating generic sensors if it's preferable to uploading individual sensors for each multi-gas meter. So ChemResponder will allow you to add a given sensor to more than one multi-gas. So generic sensors could be made available for your typical sensors that you'd see on your generic multi-gas, your PID, LEL sensor, oxygen O2, CO, etc. So that is an option for you if you think that's going to be easier for your context. For any given equipment record in the site, you can add maintenance schedules. You can also add maintenance records. I'll show this in the demo in a moment, how that can be done. But again, we do get a lot of feedback from first responder organizations, other organizations that might be currently tracking their maintenance on an Excel sheet or something to that effect. They find ChemResponder really handy, even just for this function, to be able to track their maintenance records in a cloud-hosted environment. It's very flexible and easily shareable with others within the organization. From the main equipment page, you can also download maintenance reports and bulk import maintenance records. So in the top there, you can see that I've got these two options, the maintenance report, and I can, similar to how I showed with importing instrumentation, I can also import maintenance records through an Excel. If you have that equipment manager role, you will also receive the maintenance report by email each week. It comes out each Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern. So it's one of the automated notifications and reporting features that we've got in the system. I also want to note that we have APIs for our chemical detection equipment. An API is what's called an application programming interface. It's a standard concept in software development. It simply allows two applications to talk with one another, quote unquote, talk with one another. And so our APIs allow chemical detection equipment to talk, so to speak, with ChemResponder directly. So the manufacturer can write an interface that allows the output from their chemical detectors to feed automatically into a ChemResponder event that the user selects. So the implications here, of course, are that the users don't need to enter the data themselves. It increases the efficiency of the data collection process and obviously the accuracy. It strips out a lot of the potential for human error, missing a decimal point, picking the wrong units, obviously that sort of thing. These are available to any manufacturer. We have had MSA, who's integrated some of their multi-gas detectors thus far. We're continuing to get interest from other manufacturers that want to integrate. So one recommendation we have is you can work with your whatever company you procure your equipment from, talk with them about taking up this process. It's a fairly straightforward process that a lot of software developers are going to be quite familiar with. We use standard protocols for the industry. So it's not terribly shouldn't be terribly onerous. Okay, I'll switch screens here so I can do a short demo. You should now be looking at my web browser. I'm in the organization space for this demo, chemical org. I'll also point out we've on the homepage, the dashboard here for the organization, we have an equipment with maintenance coming due tile. So it's kind of a snapshot of maintenance due for the organization, as you can see here. On the side navigation on the left, I'll go to our equipment page. I'll point out a few things that I talked about on the presentation there. Again, at the top, we see the different options that we discussed. So our add equipment option here, the drop-down gives you these three options for adding new equipment. We've got our maintenance report available here that'll download as a PDF. The import equipment option here, when I click this, it brings me to the screen. Again, I earlier showed. So our download chemical template file with instructions. This is what you want to download. It'll give you that Excel sheet when you click this, where again, you can upload your instruments there. And then when you choose the file, you'll again, just choose that Excel that you worked with to add your instruments. Download organization chemical equipment. So this will download all my existing equipment that I've got in there and all the metadata for each of those instruments so that you can modify each of those records in each of the rows and upload that to do a bulk update. Jumping back to the table here, I'm going to navigate into the generic multi-gas that I showed before. So I'm coming down here to our multi-gas meter. Like I showed, we can click on the magnifying glass to view details. This convert to template option that I pointed out before, again, that's available for you up here. If you have, again, other instruments you want to upload that have the same make model. It doesn't make a ton of sense in the case of a generic instrument, but again, this is where you'd be able to convert this record to a template. Scrolling down, again, the maintenance sections here. So this is where I can create maintenance schedules. You can create more than one maintenance schedule. Again, on the far right, I have the add option, where it'll ask me to give a name to the schedule. I can choose the type of maintenance that this is and define on the periodicity of the maintenance that I'm conducting, if it's annual, quarterly, monthly, et cetera. You can add maintenance records to the instrument here. So I've got an add option on the far right. Simple interface. It'll ask me when the maintenance is conducted, who conducted that. It'll auto-populate with your name, but you can change this. Type of maintenance that was conducted. It'll draw from, you have the option of doing an ad hoc, but it'll also draw from the maintenance schedules that you have for this equipment. Choose the type of maintenance that was done, whether the result was successful or unsuccessful, leave any comments, and you can upload any standard file attachments if that's a Word, PDF, Excel, image file. It'll accept any of those things. Scrolling down here, we've got our assigned sensors section here. So again, this is what we looked at a moment ago. You can see I've got these 4 sensors on board of this multi-gas. So again, the manage function over here on the far right, I can go into that and it'll show me the sensors currently on board with the add equipment option here as well. Again, I pointed out that this is a multi-select. I can go in and select any number of these sensors I might want to add. There's a search function up top here, so I can search through the list. And again, the list will only be showing those equipment records that are tagged with some type of sensor tag. So again, the importance of making sure that your equipment is tagged the right way. I'm also just going to jump over to an event real quick to touch a little bit in the last part here on the thresholds piece. And so I'm in a demonstration event, a pre-existing event for demos, and I'm going to open my configuration tab down here and go to our thresholds to point this out. And so I've got my default chemical reading thresholds here. So I'm going to go into the details for chemical readings. Again, like I showed on screen before, what I'm seeing here are the different thresholds that I've defined by sensor type. And so again, we can see in the table how to define each of these thresholds. These are configurable by any event manager within the event. You can go in and change what these values are. You can add additional threshold types by sensor type. I'm going to jump over to my map here. I've got the details view for a data point already pulled up. Let me just go to webinars, catching up here. So what I'm showing here is our event map. Again, I've got the details view for one of my readings. And so I'm going to go to the sensor readings tab here. And so this is the reading, this reading in the top left kind of corner of my map. This chemical reading is colorized as yellow, as you can see. So as I look at the sensor readings that came from this multi-gas, I can see, well, looks like for the carbon monoxide sensor I had on there, I've got 10 parts per million. So it's triggering that medium threshold to colorize this as yellow. So again, that's how you can make sure that you're able to take full advantage of the chemical severity thresholds function within your event space. Let me just flip back to the PowerPoint again. So as we close out here, we've got a lot of resources available in our resource library in ChemResponder. There's a document section. There's also a video section. The webinar today will be recorded. We will upload that to our YouTube channel, and it will also go into the ChemResponder resource library where you can refer back to it or share it with colleagues. We encourage you to join us for other upcoming webinars that we have. November 10th, we'll have a session on GIS file management. Also in November, we have a session on facility management in ChemResponder and RadResponder. Later on in December, we'll treat data collection set templates. And you can register for these webinars on our homepage before logging in. There are sign-up options there for you. If you have questions, obviously, we're about to have a little bit of Q&A. You can also reach out to us, our support email, support@cburnresponder.net. And again, I'll point you towards our resource library where we have job aids, videos from this webinar, as well as previous sessions that are at your disposal.